Okay, good morning, everybody. Um, so first of all, uh, our shir is sponsored today by Mr. and Mrs. Barry Lichtman in honor of the bris. Is it tomorrow, Barry? In honor of the bris of their new grandson?
It's today, Rabbi.
Oh, today. Mazel
Mm,
tov. What time is
Thank
the bris?
you. 9:30.
Okay, wonderful,
Mazel
wonderful.
tov.
Mazel
Mazel
tov.
tov, Barry.
To
Thank
Torah
you.
and Masim Tovim.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi.
And this morning, I just opened up my WhatsApp and I saw Brian's post. So, Brian, tell us about the history of that post.
Well, when I came across it, my wife is always suggesting I try to get rid of a few things because I'm like the hoarder in the family, so I have the possessions from late grandparents and parents and such. And I came across the paper, so at first I found it, obviously very coincidental. But Simcha Marshall sent me a link to your colleague's Rabbi Goldberg's Emunah Shir, and he spoke about Hashem being in your life, and sort of reflected on that, and that's what you know really made a bit of a connection for me.
Okay, so but now, did your father? Do you know anything about this particular pledge that your father took?
Well,
And what?
that's what's my dad had. I don't think I ever saw him pat a dog or never had any. The closest he came to animals I was thinking was like when he barbecued. Uh, so like it's so out of character for my dad was a businessman, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the actual that pledge, was very uncharacteristic. So it was that why it was a bit. I don't want to say stunning to find, but it was literally stunning to find. Like I sent it to my brother, and he said, like, he was astonished. So then with the timing that we're studying this, so it was
Yeah,
just, obviously had a bit of an impact on me.
sure. Like, but I'm just wondering, was it like part of a Boy Scouts pledge or?
Yeah. Well, so, I Googled it a bit, and it seemed to be a precursor to, everything that now is really what people are trying to live their lifestyle by, right? Ecologically sound, friendly to animals and such. So,
So he was an idealistic young man, I guess.
oh, he was very idealistic. I mean, he was a politician, and he was, a liberal in a sense that he believed if in the positive aspect of assimilation, if there's, that type of thinking. I'm not saying that in a negative way at all. He believed in taking all those opportunities.
Right. Right. Okay. Very interesting. Well, it shows you. I mean, Rav Kook probably wrote his work on vegetarianism and animals around in the 1930s. So it's there was something in the air at that time.
Very interesting. Yeah, I can't make that connection. I can't. Maybe it's there. Maybe I'll find something else to reinforce that connection.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, we're ready to go on to the next halacha, and the next halacha it does not involve Tsar Bali Chaim anymore, but it continues along our discussion of halachos having to do with travelers. And in the course of our discovering, you know, whenever there's traveling halacha, halacha of how you negotiate when you're traveling and you encounter some kind of conflict along the road, and that's what this halacha is going to discuss. So the introduction to this halacha is with the following words. This is in Sif Yud Aleph in the Rav Shulchan Aruch. So it says, "B'tzedek tishpot amitecha." The Torah says, "Judge your fellow with justice." Okay, that's literally what it means. Ma Talmud Omar. So the Talmud asks, what does this come to teach if I already have another pasuk that says, "V'halo kvar nemar tzedek tzedek tirdov," justice, justice you shall pursue. So you have two psukim that seem to be telling you the exact same thing. So why do you need both? Ela echad ledin ve'echad lepishara. So the answer is that there are two types of judgment that any Beis Din can make, or even outside of Beis Din. You can go according to the letter of the law, which is din, and you can go according to pishara, which is a compromised, negotiated settlement. And both of them have their advantages and disadvantages. But today we're going to learn about pishara, about a compromise. Shetehei b'tzedek b'makom she'ein din. That whenever you're not adjudicating according to the strict letter of the law, make sure that the compromise is also a fair compromise. Now, we'll talk about this in cases of law in just a minute. But certainly it stands to reason that there are many instances in real life where you would not want to go according to the letter of the law, and you would want to come up with a compromise settlement. Two people come with a conflict, and it's a very complicated case. It's not cut and dry. So to have to go drill down to the very, very detailed last points of the law might end up with a very, very difficult judgment. And you're dealing with a huge amount of money, and you're dealing with people who, invested a lot. And so sometimes a compromised negotiated settlement is sometimes the best way to go. Other times, not. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But how does that have to do with laws of traveling? So let's take a look. Ketzad. Beis Sefinos ha'ovros zu keneged zu. You have two boats that are traveling in a canal in opposite directions, and they eventually meet each other. Now the problem is that at some point in this channel, or this canal, it's a very, very narrow pass. Im shtehen ovros bevas achas shtehen tovos. So the problem is, at this particular place where the two boats meet, if they try to go forward, they're going to invariably collide with each other. They're going to scrape, the boats will scrape against each other, and both boats will get irreparably damaged, and both boats will sink. Okay? Because there's just not enough room to squeeze through two boats. It's too narrow of a channel. But in bezu acharzu ovros. But what can happen is that one boat can back up, go to a wider place in this body of water, and then let the other boat pass by, and then he can go forward again. But this is the conflict. Each boat says, you back up. No, you back up, right? Because it's going to take hours of maneuvering. It's going to take us, it's a very laborious detour. It's a tremendous inconvenience. It's going to cost money, because we're on a tight schedule. So whichever boat is going to back up is going to end up having to make a sacrifice. So how do you determine which boat should back up? So therefore, in bezu acharzu ovros tzricha echas mehen lachzu lachar el makom rachav. So as I just said, one of the boats is going to have to back up to a wider part of the body of water, so to allow two boats to pass. V'chein shnei gemalim, and the same thing is not true with boats in a narrow channel, but it's, let's say you have two camels that are walking on a very, very narrow road, let's say on the side of a mountain, okay, and it's a very, very narrow pass. Ha'olim ma'alos gevohos upagu zeh bazeh b'rosh hahar, and they are both traveling up to the top of a mountain with a very narrow pass. One is coming from the east, one is coming from the west, and they meet each other at the top of the mountain, and lo and behold, there's no room for two camels to pass at the point where they meet each other. Im ovrim shneim bevas achas shneim noflim. If they try to pass at the same time, if they try to crisscross at that point, both camels will slip and fall off the mountain. And v'im bazeh achar zeh olim b'tzarech echad mehem lachzor la'achorav. But if one of them backs up to a point where there's a wider expanse, a wider portion of road, so then this fellow backing up will allow the two of them to cross each other's path at that point. So in both of these cases, one person is going to have to inconvenience themselves on behalf of the other person. So Keitzad Heimosim. So what should they do? So first of all, the halacha states that. Let's take a look at the halacha. Im echas mehen teuna, ve'echas eina teuna. Let's say one boat or one camel is laden with merchandise, and the other one is not. So tidacheh she'eina teuna min ha-teuna. So then the one that is not laden should back up for the sake of the one that is laden. Okay, in other words, you have to take a look at who has the greater inconvenience in backing up. So if one of them has a heavy cargo and the other one doesn't, so it's a greater inconvenience, more effort, more inertia, more energy is needed for the one that has a heavy cargo to back up. So therefore we tell the one that is not as heavily loaded to back up for the sake of the one that is heavily loaded. V'im echas mehen karova lintos, shebima'at shetachzor la'achoreha, yimtza makom lechaverta la'avor, ve'echas mehen rechoka lintos, tidche hakrova mipnei harechoka. And let's say another scenario is where, let's say, one of them, if it backs up, it only has to go back 100 feet in order to find an area where the road is wide enough or the channel is wide enough. But the other one would not have to back up 100 feet, it would have to back up 500 feet. So you look at, okay, so one of us has to back up, which one has to back up more? So the one that has to travel less should be the one to back up. That would be another way of determining, in a situation where not everything is equal. But, hayu shtehen tu'unos, o shtehen rechokos o krovos. But, so that's where the din is pretty clear. One of them has to inconvenience himself for the sake of the other. So the one that has to inconvenience less should back up for the sake of the one who would have to back up further, or would have to have a heavier movement. Okay, but let's say all things are equal. How do you make a determination which one has to back up? So the halacha is hatel pshara beinehem. So make a compromise. Ve'hem ma'alim schar zelazeh mi sheyachzor la'achorav. And the pshara, the compromise is, I'll back up if you're willing to pay me, or you back up and I'll pay you. So compensation. And this is a situation where there is no optimal solution, because each side is no more right than the other side, okay? And therefore the only way to do it is to compromise. And the compromise has to be done in such a way where both parties feel that they have been in some way made whole for the inconvenience. Okay? So that's an example of pishara, where you're not always able to clearly determine who is the victor and who is the loser. Okay, so that's the basic halacha, and the reason why we're reading it here is because it has to do with laws of traveling. You encounter this when you travel on the road. Let's say in a contemporary example, two cars come to an impasse on a very narrow road. Which one backs up and which one goes forward? So if it's on a steep incline, the car that is, and one of them has to back up, logic dictates that the one who has to back up going down should back up for the sake of the one who's already in other words, if it's on a steep incline and one car is going up and the other car is going down, it makes sense for the car that's on the going upwards to back up so that both cars are moving towards in a downward position. Okay, because that's the least amount of inertia that's required. More inertia is required, more energy is required of the car who would have to back up going upwards than the car that's backing up going downwards, right? So that's pretty clear. And if of course you're dealing with a great expenditure of energy, and it's going to cost real money, like with boats, in shipping. This could even be a contemporary example. Let's say in the, I don't know, probably the Panama Canal probably has 2 lanes, I would imagine, although I don't know, but there may be other canals in other parts of the world where someone has to back up for the sake of another. Can anyone think of any other contemporary examples? I don't know. Okay, so let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov. So the introduction to this is that when you need to compromise, the compromise should be fair as well. Omnam, says the Imrei Yaakov, Matzinu, the gam b'makom de'ika din, mitzvah lomar lebali dinim batchila, im din atem rotzim, o b'peshara. So here the Imrei Yaakov is introducing us to a concept having to do with din and pshara. That when 2 litigants walk into court, the Beis Din should ask them the following question. Rabboisai, Reuven and Shimon have a dispute, a financial dispute. Do you want us to go according to din, or do you want us to go according to peshara? Which means that they're asking them, do you want us to tell you that, winner take all, that whoever is really entitled to the money will be granted the judgment, or would you like us to rule based upon peshara, which means that we'll try to make both parties not completely whole, but we won't allow either party to walk away empty-handed? Which would you prefer? And if they both say we're okay with peshara, then the Beis Din has the option, and they can exercise the option of peshara, where they don't have to give a legal judgment, but rather they can say, we want both parties to feel that they've been somewhat vindicated, and therefore we'll come up with a compromised settlement. And the Shulchan Aruch writes, "V'chol Beis Din she'osa peshara tamid harei meshubach." And the more that a Beis Din can come up with a peshara, the more, instead of din, the more praiseworthy it is. V'yalfinan la, how do we know this? Midichsiv, emes u'mishpat shalom shiftu b'sha'arechem. Because there's another verse that says, this is not from the Chumash, this is from the Navi. It says, truth and justice and peace you shall judge in your gates. Eze mishpat sheyesh bo shalom. So what kind of justice leads to peace? Zu peshara. This is a compromised settlement, because on some level both parties feel vindicated and they're able to better make peace with each other. Now, I want to point out that this is not always the case. There are some times when one or both parties realize that, well, let's say a person has been swindled out of some money, and I'm dealing with a real life case in this situation. Let's say a person has been swindled out of money, and it's clear as day to the person who's been cheated that they had a contract. The contract was clear. There was no misrepresentation. They are owed the money. and the other party simply refuses to pay because they don't want to pay. It's too much money for them. And so they decide, so then they say, okay, we'll have to go litigate this. You're not willing to pay, but it's very clear in the contract. If they come to Beis Din in that scenario, and the Beis Din says, what do you prefer, din or pishara? It's very reasonable for the plaintiff to say, I want din. Look, it's right here. It's right here, black and white in the contract. The guy was provided with services. I fixed his car. He doesn't want to pay. The bill for the car is $500. He doesn't want to pay. I'm not going to take 50 cents on the dollar just because he doesn't want to pay and I've had to take him to Beis Din. Right? I rendered services. He signed a contract before I fixed his car, and now he's got to pay me. That's just the way the business works. He says, no, I'm not paying you because I don't feel that I owe you the money. Why should I take less than what is owed to me and what this contract says he owes me? And so there are times when pishara will actually result in less peace, right? So you have to know how to apply this halacha. So, many times pishara is the right move because it'll end up creating peace. You can think of a number of different scenarios where, let's say, you have two business partners or two neighbors who are having a dispute, and it's not so clear, right? It was, maybe there was an honest mistake that was made, and one of the partners made a mistake in the type of investment that he made with the corporate funds, and so the other partner is suing him for messing up for misusing the corporate finances. But it wasn't a malicious thing. It's not clear cut. So sometimes a Beis Din will say, listen, it could be that according to halacha, this guy messed up and he's got to pay you. But since he didn't do it maliciously, we're going to do a pishar and make him only pay you 50 cents on the dollar, right? So that you split the difference between the two of them. And this way your partnership can continue because you're allowing this fellow to save his dignity by not giving the entire award to the other party. So it all depends on the circumstances. Okay? All right, let's go on. Hatel Pishara. So you should make a Pishara between the two parties, and whichever one is going to back up, when all things are equal, should get compensated by the other party. Right? So it either, and each party has to learn how to compromise. So either I'll back up and you'll pay me, or you back up and I'll pay you. Whichever one you want to do. Now it could be that there has to be a negotiated settlement on how much I should pay you, right? So they have to come up with a reasonable amount about what party owes how much is owed to the other party. But that's how you learn to maneuver life, is you learn how to compromise. Okay, so hatel pishar, make a compromise. Shiyara shechansa bamidbar. Now this is another halacha that is found in Shulchan Aruch, and the Imrei Yaakov feels it pertinent to bring this halacha as well over here. You have, let's say, a group of people who are traveling, and they have to stop over in the middle of the night. There's no hotels. It's not like the way we travel today. You've got a group of people who are traveling from Minsk to Pinsk, and they've got to stop along the way overnight in the middle of no man's land. V'amar alehem gayas litorfa, and all of a sudden a band of marauders comes along. It's like in one of these westerns, they make a bonfire, and a group of marauders come and they try to hold them up. Upasku im hagayas mamon. And they negotiate with these marauders that they'll pay them a certain amount of money to leave them alone. So the question is, how much does each person pay? How much does each person pay? So the halacha is mechashven lefi mamonam ve'ein mechashven lefi nefashos. Shaharei bishvil mamon levad bo. So the halacha is that each person pays based on his income, not a flat amount per person. And the reason is because when marauders come, they come with the expectation that they're going to steal from the rich and steal more from the rich and steal less from the poor. So if there was no negotiation with these marauders and they basically held guns to everyone and said, empty everything you got and we're going to pick you clean, so then there's nothing to talk about. But if we negotiate with these marauders and say, gentlemen, instead of us ending up with a violent disaster over here, how about if we give you $1,000? Will that make you happy? We'll let you go on your way, we'll go on our way. And that was basically how things worked in the old world, is that sometimes you could actually negotiate with these guys and say, is it okay if we just give you $1,000, 1,000 rubles, or this bag of coins, and throw it at them, and then they would go away. So how do you determine how much each person has to surrender? So the halacha states that in that kind of scenario, it's not that you collect a flat amount from each traveler, because one traveler may be a millionaire and the other traveler may be a pauper. And if the marauders would have picked each person clean, they would have gotten much more from the wealthy person than from the poor person. So therefore, if they say, okay, there's 10 of you here, we'll take $1,000, you don't say it's a flat $100 per person, but rather you see, how much money is the rich man traveling with? If he's traveling with $10,000 and the poor person is only traveling with $300, so then you have to make an assessment based upon what the marauders would have gotten had they attacked everyone and taken everything from them and used violence. Okay, so it's based on the amount of money that each person is traveling with, that you take a certain percentage to come up with the aggregate of $1,000. And you just have to do the math. You sit down, hopefully one of the guys traveling is an accountant, and he'll figure it all out. Okay? Now, v'im sachru moraderach lifnehem, and let's say this group of people, okay, so instead of a group of marauders attacking, here's another scenario. Let's say they're traveling from Minsk to Pinsk and they find a guide to lead them on the journey, and each person has to pay the guide to lead them. So how do you determine how much each person pays? The guide's fee is $1,000. How much does each person have to pay? So you could say, well, on the one hand, it's a flat amount. On the other hand, let each person pay based on how much money they're traveling with. So there it's slightly different. Mechashven lefi mamon ulefi nefashot. He says there you divide it. 50% of his fee is a flat head tax, and 50% of his fee is based on each person's income. Each person, how much money they're traveling with. Debazeh shehu monam shelo yistaknu mipnei chayos velistim mishum hachi mechashvim chatzi lefi mamon b'shvil alistim v'chatzi lefi nefashos mishum chayos shehu sakanos nefashos. He says because a guide is meant to protect you from two different things. He's supposed to protect you from wild animals, and he's supposed to protect you from highwaymen, from marauders. So when it comes to wild animals, everyone has to pay an equal amount, because a tiger doesn't care whether you're wealthy or poor. He's going to eat you anyway, and you are no more deserving of protection whether you're a rich man or a poor man. The lion doesn't discriminate. So therefore, each person has to pay a flat amount to cover the cost of protection from non-human potential dangers. But the human danger of a marauder is where they come for money. And there, it all depends on how much you're traveling with, what your economic bracket is. And so therefore, each person would pay based on how much assets they're transporting with them. And you would make that assessment, again, using the accountant in the group, But here you divide it. 50% of the guide's salary is a flat head tax, and 50% is based on an income tax or a sliding scale based on how much each person is traveling with. So that's and that again involves using peshara, using this whole concept of coming up with a compromise settlement that is fair and makes each person whole. Okay? Questions, comments? Okay, so if not, we'll hold it here. And Mirza Hashem will continue on Monday. Let me wish you all a wonderful Shabbos and have a nice weekend. And we'll see you soon.
Shukrach, Rabbi. Good Shabbos,
Okay,
everyone.
good Shabbos and Mazel Tov.
Shabbos.